Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. We have a gentleman here that has had a conversion, and he came to the men's conference and spoke to the men, and we had a glorious time at the conference. And said, hey, you should do a podcast with me. And he said, okay, sure. And I think it's because of the hundreds and thousands of dollars that I sent him in the mail in peanut butter cans illegally is the reason he decided to come on the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome Matt Remick from Rapid City, South Dakota, home of the Dinosaur Hill. Do you have Dinosaur Hill over there?
Yes, we do, right in the middle of town.
Oh, and have you been up on that Dinosaur Hill?
Once or twice, once in a blizzard. That was pretty cool.
Oh, great. Great to have you, Matt. I'd like you to share your testimony. Catholics don't do very well with testimony. We're getting better over the years, but I wanted to share you have a pretty unique testimony, like all of us do, but you have a really wonderful testimony. I wanted you first to share a little bit about where you grew up and if you had any faith growing up.
Yeah, good question. So I grew up in a typical middle-class American South Dakotan home. Two parents who absolutely loved me, and I am very thankful for being born into the family that I was and am. Have a very good relationship with my parents, and I love them dearly. But faith wasn't always the central part of their life. It was never, Jesus isn't the center of their life. And they did the best that they raised me the best they could with what they had, but faith was never at the center of it. Growing up in the church that I did, CCD was kind of the thing you did on Wednesday, but never, like religious education was the thing you did on Wednesday, but never really touched my heart, never really got to me. I think the people that were teaching us were doing their best, but I don't know, nothing really, no seeds are really sprouted there. And it was kind of, looking back at what I know now, it was kind of frustrating. I wish that I had gotten more when I was younger, more formation, that better witnesses to the faith. But despite that, my grandma suffered from a pretty serious chronic illness called polycystic kidney disease. And her witness to suffering was absolutely beautiful. So if you don't know what that is, I'd encourage you to look it up. Essentially, cysts grew on her kidneys and eventually killed them. So she had to go on kidney dialysis for 4 hours a day, 3 days a week for 33 years before she finally passed away, which is just incredible. And eventually ate her bones away to the point of being the consistency of cartilage, basically. She suffered a lot, was in constant pain, but was always faithful, always loved Jesus. I think that witness was one of the best. I think most people in my family would agree that they still maintain the faith because of her witness to faith while suffering, which is absolutely beautiful.
Boy, if it wasn't for grandmas, I'm telling you, a lot of us wouldn't exist in the church. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
So where did you grow up? What town? What area?
I grew up in Pierce, South Dakota, the state capital, and it's right smack dab in the middle. My parents were both government workers. My mom worked for Federal Highway. My dad worked for the South Dakota Department of Transportation. So I always joke that around the dinner table, of all things, they talked about roads.
Yeah.
Road construction and road maintenance, which was hilarious. But they were great. Had made some fairly influential decisions in some of the roadways in South Dakota, and it's pretty cool to see their handiwork. I actually drive down one of my dad's road plans most days, which is pretty neat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
My dad did this.
Yes.
That's cool. Would you go to Riggs High School then?
Yep, went to Riggs. Grew up in Saints Peter and Paul and Pierre. Shout out to them.
Sure. What year did you graduate?
Graduated in 2012. And then as soon as I graduated, I immediately joined the South Dakota Air National Guard and left for basic training a month later.
Oh, that a boy. Where did you go to basic training?
Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
Oh, sure. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I think there was another chance to grow in faith as well. It was kind of the first time I was out on my own, away from the parents, away from anyone, any sort of accountability, really in anything in my life, and very much alone by myself without family for the first time, but not alone. I had my basic training flight, and they had a bunch of good men with me helping to form me. Very good drill instructor, very good MTI, and there too, church was an opportunity to get away from the dorms for a day.
Oh yeah.
Sunday morning, you could go to both religious education and mass and get about 3 to 4 hours out of the dorms sometimes, away from the drill instructors, away from making beds, rolling shirts, etc. So I made sure to go to both every weekend. I think that might have even had some sort of influence in my eventual conversion, but that was pretty cool.
That's
Basically went to
interesting to
mass
me,
and, go ahead.
Matt. That's interesting to me because you just said a second ago that might have had some influence. And I think my conversion started in basic training in 1988 in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I didn't know you were a military guy.
Yep, been in for 12 years now.
Good for you. So what happened next?
Good question. So after basic training, I got back and started my normal rotation in the National Guard, normal drills. Started college at Northern State University in Aberdeen, South Dakota. Go Wolves. And there got to make a bunch of friends that would have a very profound influence in my faith life. And it didn't start where you might think. My first semester there, I was assigned a roommate, and he was Korean. He was from South Korea,
No kidding.
and we got along very well. And my second roommate the next semester was also Korean, and we started to share our faith, actually. So Korea is primarily Buddhist. I think Christianity is the dominant religion there now, but the society is very, very rooted in Buddhism. So we started to talk faith late at night. Then after that, I got my third roommate, who was a Saudi Arabian, and he was Muslim. And I hung out with him and his friends, who were also, of course, Muslim. And we started having some of the same conversations. Late at night, we'd stay up talking about faith, talking about philosophy, sharing each other's experiences growing up in a relationship with the faith. While that was happening, I actually got deployed twice. I went to 2013. I went to Jordan, Azraq Air Force Base, Jordan, and then Kunsan Air Base, South Korea in 2015. And so I got to see the cultures that we had been discussing.
No
And that
kidding.
was fascinating. Yeah.
Well, how was the food?
Excellent.
No
Gotta
way.
admit, gotta admit, Korea was a little bit better than Jordan.
Well, there you go. I suppose you didn't have a lot of hot dogs over there, did you?
Actually, the Koreans love hot dogs. It's a whole long story from back in the Korean War. They would trade the Americans for hot dogs and Vienna sausages and spam.
Oh, that's
One of my
cool.
favorite dishes is made out of that. So,
So you dabbled in a couple of religions already, Muslim, Buddhism, and then where did you go next?
so after years of these conversations, years of these late nights, staying up, drinking and talking philosophy, like late into the night, sometimes early in the next morning, I started to ask questions. I started to see that these two religions that were sitting in front of me, that my friends were presenting in actually presenting it very well, there was some pretty staunch inconsistencies between them. American culture teaches us that all faiths are the same, that they all lead to the same place, that they're trails leading to the top of the same mountain. And I started to see that that wasn't exactly true. That the Muslim idea of heaven, which is similar to ours, and the Buddhist idea of nirvana were not the same. They're in fact drastically different. heaven being a place that you go, and nirvana being the re-entry of your body back into the natural energy flow of the universe. Both, of course, claim leading to peace, but their theologies are vastly inconsistent. And that actually stood out to me even before I had any real philosophical training. So one night, after realizing this, I promised myself that I would go on a quest. I'd go on a little adventure. I was laying in bed, and I actually spoke to God. I was like, I'm pretty sure you exist, but I promise you, and I promise myself, that I'm going to go on this adventure and figure out which one is true. Which religion actually contains the truth, or at least the most truth? Which one leads people to the most peace in this life? Which one prepares us best for the next? Which one has had the best influence in the cultures that it's developed? Which one is actually true? And so I started asking more and more questions of my friends. I started asking them to teach me how to pray, teaching me how to meditate in their tradition. So briefly, I started praying the Salat, which is the Muslim prayer that they do 5 times a day. If you've seen any Muslim videos, usually they're chanting over a city, and that's the call to prayer, the call to the Salat. And it's a very actually physical prayer. So I started doing that for a time, and then one of my Buddhist friends, who was a very strong practicing Buddhist, introduced me to meditation. I started watching some YouTube videos on how to do meditation, and I started to experiment with Buddhist meditation as well. And that is actually some of the most peace I've experienced internally. But yeah, we'll get to that more later on, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So these experiences in prayer started to show me where it was leading. And at the same time, my girlfriend at the time started dragging me back to Mass, because again, I grew up Catholic and she did too, and she wanted to start getting back into her faith. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll go with, but I'm doing this for you, not for me.
Right.
And after a few months of going to Mass with her, I ran into a focus missionary in the back of Mass. And after the second time of meeting him, he invited me to a Bible study. And in my mind, I thought, this would be an interesting opportunity to give Christianity a second chance. Because what I received in the past was basically just morals. And if all Christianity is for is morals, I can get that somewhere else. But this actually gave me a chance to explore the theology, the philosophy, the tradition of Christianity. And so I started going to his Bible study, and for the first time experienced a voice in my head speaking back. The leader of the Bible study, shout out to Rob Cargill in Vermilion, he introduced me to Lectio Divina and Ignatian meditation and various other forms of mental prayer. And for the first time, I heard God speak back to me. That very quiet,
Wow.
subtle voice in the back of my head, but something spoke back. And that kind of blew my mind.
So, can you share with us what God said to you?
Honestly, I don't really remember. What I do remember is we were meditating on the Gospels. He was leading us through the Gospels. And at one time, I was able to, in an Ignatian meditation, use my imagination to actually speak to Jesus. And Jesus spoke back to me. And I remember he said something very profound, but I don't remember what the words are. Forgive me. I was also able to speak to people in the crowds and get insight as to who Jesus was. Again, something profoundly different.
Right. Right. And that's very usual, actually, that God will speak to you. Sometimes he doesn't say words. Sometimes he just loves you in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a version of him speaking to you. So what happened next?
So after experiencing that voice for the first time, I mean, I was hooked.
Mm.
There's something different here, something different from the
Hmm.
Salat, which is very regimented and actually in a pretty good way. You need some regimental prayer, but I never experienced in that prayer something speaking back. In the Buddhist meditation, It teaches you how to shut off your brain, and in that space, nothing can speak back. But in this time in prayer, I heard God, and I knew something was different. And so after that, I never missed a Bible study from that week until I graduated college just over a year later. So Rob really introduced me to prayer and introduced me to Christ, and then Jesus did the rest of the work.
So after that Bible study, how did your week go after God spoke to you?
Yeah, I felt more free.
Mm.
I felt as if someone or something was pursuing me. That something was out to get me in a good way, if that makes sense.
It does.
Pursuing my heart, pursuing my mind, pursuing me. It's that old transition from knowing that God loves the church, that God loves people, to God actually loves me individually. God loves Matt Remick and not just the Catholic Church or this church or that church. Like, he loves me. And that's a profound difference. There's a transition to be made there. One of them is too general to actually be made personal, and one of them is intimately personal. And once I encountered that, there's really no other place to go.
Wow. I would call that a metanoia experience, change of the heart. And it's not difficult to do, Lectio Divina, is it?
Not at all.
So explain to our viewers, how does one attempt Lectio Divina?
Yeah. Normally, you start, of course, with the Bible, with the scripture. I'd recommend, if you're going to do it for the first time, start somewhere in the Gospels. But you can do this with any portion of scripture. And put yourself in a silent place, a place with very little distraction, very little noise. Preferably, if you can make it, in front of a tabernacle or in front of the Eucharist in adoration. That's the best place to go. And start with a small passage, about a paragraph long maybe, and read through it. And as you're read through it slowly and deliberately. And something, as you're reading, will always stick out to you. Whether it be a word, a phrase, a scene in the reading, or something that Jesus said, or even the way he said it, will stick out to you. I usually read through it a second and a third time. And then after that, sit with the passage rolling through my mind, running through my mind over and over again, contemplating it, thinking about, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? What does this mean philosophically? What does this mean theologically? But really, what does it mean to me in my heart? How is God speaking to me through this? Why did this verse, or why did this word, or why did this phrase stick out to me? Why is this sticking out to me? And that's when that conversation with God really begins. The back and forth with God really begins.
Yeah, I think a lot of men don't believe that God is really real because they haven't experienced something so simple like Lectio Divina or praying with the scriptures. And it didn't take you long at all to hear God speak to you and look after just short moment in time, it began to change your life. So how did you see yourself growing in the Catholic Church?
Yeah, good question. So the encounters with Jesus don't end there. The presentation of the faith that I had received growing up was very emotionally based. It was almost constant appeals to emotion, but never appeals to the intellect. So I knew that God was some sort of emotional crutch for people, but I was never given any reason to believe that God existed. I didn't know that God's existence was actually reasonable. So I started to explore that avenue as well. Rob, that missionary, invited me to Focus's national conference in 2017 in San Antonio, Texas, called Seek, Best Seek Ever.
Hey, I was there.
Yes.
I was there. Go ahead. No, I was there, and I had a profound experience after receiving communion. But this is not about me. I was at that same conference you were. I didn't know that. That's cool.
It's interesting how many people I run into who are at that 2017 Seek.
Hmm.
But there, I went with the focus team out of Northern, and I was very reluctant to go at first. I was like, this must just be another emotional high, an opportunity to experience God emotionally, and it'll be empty. So I tried to use every excuse I could to get out of it. And finally, Rob said, just come with, you have the time. And I finally said, okay, I trust you. So I went with, and it was at the conference that I was introduced to the intellectual arm of the church. I went to speakers like Dr. Ted Shree and Scott Hahn, and who else was there? I can't remember if Archbishop Chaput was that one or SLS 2018 the following year, but I saw him. I was very impressed by his talk. But the way they presented the faith was never an outright appeal to emotion. They were actually using logic. They were using evidence based in reality. They were using the existence of the universe itself as evidence to prove that God existed. And these reasonings that they were using were profoundly consistent. And they were hard to break open and to actually show that they were wrong. And the deeper I had questions, but the deeper I got into it, the more I realized how consistent it was, how robust it was. And I was really impressed. I was like, okay, something is much different here. But that's not where God ended at that conference. At the adoration night, I experienced Jesus speaking to me out of the Eucharist. At one moment, I looked up and everything went silent. And I heard God say something to me very profound, very personal, and I won't share it, but very deeply personal that only He could have known. Something I had never told anyone else, something that I'd never even talked about before. But He said exactly what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear, exactly what I needed to hear. And it was then that confirmed for me, after experiencing the intellectual proofs, now I've met God personally. I've actually seen Him work. I've seen His face here on earth, and He's spoken to me. And then I was convinced. I realized that the place that held the truth, the fullness of the truth here on earth, was actually where I had began my journey in the Catholic Church. The
Yeah,
place I least expected to find it.
isn't that interesting? Yeah, I think they would call you a revert.
Yes.
Yeah, you reverted. That same thing happened to me too. I found myself at age 17, 18 years old, leaving the Catholic Church. I even told the Lord, I'm out of here. And he didn't say I couldn't go. And then I realized after listening to Scott Hahn CDs over and over and over that, oh my gosh, Catholic Church has it all. I just couldn't see it.
Yes, I agree. And after that, I went on a quest then to try and make sense of what the heck just happened to me.
Right.
So I'd been studying psychology as a portion of my educational formation in school as I was studying to be a history teacher. And so I went back there and tried to figure out if any of those constructs, any of those psychological constructs explained what just happened to me. And none of them did. None of their explanations fit what was going on. Even asking friends about it, they agreed that that wasn't the truth. That wasn't what was happening. And then I started to read the saints, saints like St. Augustine and Aquinas, and even, honestly, Bishop Robert Barron's YouTube channel was very influential on me. But hearing them speak about these same experiences and the way they said it was exactly what happened to me. It's like, okay, something's happening here that's not just my experience. This seems to be something universal here. And so I started pursuing that and reading more about them, reading more Lives of the Saints, reading more Catholic theology, and that's what led me to where I am today.
That's awesome. Did you end up joining Focus Ministries?
Yes, I did.
Oh, cool. What year
Yes.
was that?
I ended up joining in 2019. I actually applied twice. Rob invited me to apply after I graduated from Northern in 2017, and I said no. After I realized God existed, I also realized that I have to basically submit my life to Him, give my life over to Him, and I asked him what he wanted me to do at that point, and he gave me a very clear sign that said you should go to graduate school. I'd been planning to go to graduate school for a few years at that point, and had applied to USD and been accepted, University of South Dakota, and been accepted. Um, and that was kind of the test. Like I said, Jesus, if you want me to go to Focus, don't pay for grad school. If you want me to go to grad school, pay for it. And he paid for it.
No
So
kidding.
that was, yeah,
Wow.
yes, yes. And so I said no to Focus, and I went off to USD, and I'm really glad I did, because I actually don't think Focus would have been very good for me at that early into my conversion. 2 years at USD really gave me a chance to grow, to be invested in
Mm.
by Catholic friends, two really good priests, and experience Catholic community, to experience the fullness of it, really develop a prayer life, an individual prayer life that I could then evangelize out of. So I'm really glad I did. I'm glad I said no to Focus at that point. Then in 2019, after I graduated from USD, I reapplied and was accepted in 2019.
How do you think Focus Ministries formation has made the man you are today?
Excellent question. So for formation, for those who don't know, I was sent to the University of Mary up in Bismarck, North Dakota. And that year it happened to be that 3/4 of Focus missionaries were at that campus. They're exploring some options there, but they placed almost all of us there. And that was incredible. So in that formation, we were given classes by some of the greatest theologians in the church, the American church today. Um, One who's a kind of an up and comer is Monsignor Shea, Monsignor James Shea out of Bismarck.
Mm-hmm.
I remember his classes being my favorite because he would use goodness, truth, and beauty in a trifecta to present the faith in just a profound way. He was great. Some of the other missionaries too gave classes, and I loved theirs, but his stood out to me quite well. And they have a 5-week formation, and we go through a series of classes, both in theological formation and in mission formation, teaching us to know the faith, but also to live the faith. And then they put us in colleges, small cohorts, if you will, of about 12 men and then two formators that help us to learn how to evangelize, how to lead a Bible study. We each take turns leading Bible studies, get to experience that just in case someone hadn't. And that was great. They helped us with formation, simple things like getting ready in the morning on time, getting up early. The men did soccer because most men don't play soccer. And as such, it was a way for us to kind of embarrass ourselves for a sport we're not used to. And so a little bit of humility, teaching us humility. And the best part, though, was my roommate. Shout out to Evan Collins. But he lives down in Louisiana currently. And we lived together for all 5 weeks. And we would stay up late until sometimes 1, 2 in the morning talking about theology. I remember we'd say, like, we're going to go to bed early, go to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and still stay up for 4 hours with the lights off in bed, just talking about Jesus. And honestly, it was those moments, those personal connections, those friendships I made that I still have, that were some of the biggest pieces of formation they gave us.
So you did a tour in Focus. How many years?
2 years.
And where did they place you?
They placed me at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Okay, great. And then you spent, 2 years in Focus?
Yep, I was there for 2 years, and I was at South Dakota Mines for both years.
Okay, so you had this training. You worked in Focus for a couple of years. Were you able to post-Focus, start a Bible study, and continue the work that they showed you how to do?
Yes, absolutely. So, of course, getting boots in the ground and actually evangelizing on a college campus, I had experiences of men having conversions in my Bible study. And they're like, there's no way that this was me. This is amazing. Learning how to get students to come to Bible study for Jesus and not just for me. not just for my friendship. And after Focus, I took those lessons. And this last April, almost a year ago now, a friend of mine and I started a Bible study using those same lessons, using those same methods, using the same Bible studies, the actual physical Bible studies that Focus provides in there, and experiencing some of the same outcomes. That's been beautiful. It's parish mission is different. It's much different. Men don't have as much time just to hang out or meet for coffee as as young men do in college. So that's been different. But I'm happy to say I'm up to around 15 men in Bible study.
That's
Getting ready
great.
to getting ready to make a second one. I'm starting to now form, and that's actually who's coming over later. Starting to form another man to make a second Bible study. Take a portion of the men and make Bible study number 2.
Good for you. Focus would be proud of you. Looking back the last few years since your conversion, do you ever think, I still can't believe that happened to me? And if so, what was that?
Sometimes, yeah. I look back and I more ask God, why me? Like, why me? Sometimes I feel more like Moses did when God said, go talk to Pharaoh. And he says, I can't, I have a speech impediment. That's how I feel sometimes.
Hmm.
Like, who am I to do this? I'm profoundly broken. Look at the sin I just did. Right? How am I qualified
Hmm.
to go show someone else to you or show you to someone else? And I don't get it. Why me? But after my encounter with Jesus, after hearing him speak to me, after the intellectual journey, I've never doubted that God isn't with me, that God isn't in this, that it isn't him working, that it's him working instead of me or through me, and often in spite of me. So that's kind of where I've gone with that. Less of like, I can't believe that happened, and more of like, why me?
Hmm. So tell us real quick, what are you doing right now as far as a career?
Yeah, so I'm currently a history teacher at St. Thomas More High School in Rapid City. My the priest that I worked with at South Dakota School of Mines is the chaplain both for the Newman Center there and for the high school, St. Thomas More High School. And after I finished my 2-year tour with Focus, I told them that I had to leave because the people who paid for grad school, they asked in return 2 years of teaching somewhere, teaching the Constitution or U.S. history somewhere. So I still owed those 2 years, and they gave me a 2-year pause in my obligation to go do mission work. And thanks be to God, they did. I'm very grateful for that. And so he said, "Well, can the obligation be done at St. Thomas More?" I said, "Sure. I don't see why not." So he set up a meeting with the principals, and I didn't know this walking in, but that meeting turned into a job interview, and they offered me a job a few months later,
No
and I've been there ever
kidding.
since. Yep.
Well, you have to tell everybody from St. Thomas More High because I taught there for 4 years, from
Yeah, that's what I
2001 to
heard.
2004, and I coached football, but I didn't coach football. I mean, we had more coaches than the Dallas Cowboys, man. Wayne Sullivan ran a great ship out there, and I loved hanging out with him and the football team, and he was a great coach and a great guy. And I don't know if Wayne is still with that system or not, but I had a wonderful time teaching at St. Thomas More. So listen, Matt, I'm so grateful you joined us for the show. Your testimony is awesome. Shout out to Focus Ministries for doing great work. I too was a Focus missionary. And so everything you were saying, I'm like, yep, I know. I've heard that story again and again. And God is really working through Focus. Anything else you'd like to say, is particularly to men?
Yes. So we as men, we as fathers, are God's image, or sorry, are the image of God to our children. So whether you're a physical father with your own children or a spiritual father in the form of a priest or a monk, you are the image of God to the rest of the world as God the Father. And what your children see in you, they will associate with God. That is both at the same time a amazing burden, but also an amazing opportunity. So we as men, owe it to our kids, owe it to our children to grow in virtue, to love Jesus with all of our heart, soul, and mind and strength, to love him with everything we have.
All right. All right. That was Mr. Matt Remick from Rapid City. Thank you, Matt, for joining me tonight. A wonderful testimony, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get those Bibles out and start praying with the scriptures. It is life-changing. I've seen it again and again and again and again. And I just encourage you, men, if you're not praying with the Bible, it's not a sissy thing. It's actually a very masculine thing. You're going to like it, and God will speak to you. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, you are loved, and may God strengthen the bars of your gates. God bless you.